5 Sinister Hiking Tales Revealed, Terrifying Fall Encounters That Haunt the Trails Forever. Sarah gripped Jake's hand tightly as they entered the festival, the bright colors of autumn leaves failing to ease the dread tightening her chest. Maplewood's annual, the fall pathway promised laughter and hugs, but lurking just beneath the surface was a whisper of terror, tales of 5 missing hikers swallowed by the woods. Jake shifted nervously, his past still haunted him. With his father gone, this hike was more than fresh air, it was a desperate chance to reconnect. As they moved closer to the trailhead, the aroma of cinnamon and pine mixed with laughter filled the air. Yet, as families chatted about their favorite hikes, a chilling rumor reached Sarah's ears. "They say those woods are cursed, 5 lost souls still wander," an old man muttered to a group of wide-eyed children. Sarah shivered, dismissing his words as folklore. It was just a tale to scare kids, she told herself, as her heart raced at the fear rolling in from the atmosphere. But once they began their hike along the newly named Whispering Pines Trail, the air shifted. Dusk descended rapidly, shadows stretching like greedy fingers. Every rustle of the leaves sent Jake flinching, his eyes darting left and right. "Just the wind, right?" Sarah murmured, despite the familiar fear creeping up her spine. She tried to shake off the feeling, but it clung to her like a second skin. Then Jake stopped dead in his tracks. "Did you hear that?" he whispered, voice trembling. She put her finger to her lips, shushing him, but even she felt the ghostly tendrils of voices echoing in the trees, whispering things she wouldn't dare to give voice to. "It's just the wind," but her assurance felt hollow. Suddenly, they saw an old man in weathered hiking gear, his eyes wild as he approached them. "Don't go further," he yelled, grasping Sarah's arm with a fervor that sent shivers down her spine. The trail's guardian doesn't take kindly to those with dark intentions. The man's eyes darted around like a cornered animal, warning them of unseen dangers. "Just some weirdo," Jake muttered, but Sarah's body trembled. What if he was right? The way the shadows shifted in the twilight made the forest feel alive, watching, waiting. They pressed on, heartbeats synchronizing with the rhythm of their footsteps. As night settled in deep, a suffocating silence fell over the woods. The overwhelming sensation of being watched enveloped them like a thick fog. Sarah glanced back, her heart racing. Were they truly along this desolate path, or was the very forest itself becoming one with their fears? "Mom!" Jake screamed, drawing her attention sharply. She turned to see him pointing towards the trees, his finger quivering in horror. Emerging from the gloom stood a figure, a man, his haggard face and torn clothing strikingly familiar yet wrong in a way that sent ice through her veins. It was their neighbor, someone they trusted, now distorted and grotesque beneath the branch shadows. The man stepped closer, pulling the darkness with him, a palpable dread oozing from beyond the trees. Swiftly, Sarah turned to run, dragging Jake deeper into the ominous woods. A voice in her head screamed against the night. What secrets lay hidden here, between the whispers of the fallen leaves? Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Panic surged as they stumbled through the unknown, the trees bending, whispering secrets meant only for their ears. She could feel the presence following them close, too close. A hope to heal her son collided with the reality of dread. Were they still among the living, or had the woods already claimed them? Would they become the next tale in a chilling history spun beneath the wild arms of whispering pines, forever echoing through the dark? Branches clawed at them as they fled, their desperate footsteps crunching on twigs like a warning bell in the silent night. Sarah's pulse thudded in her ears, a painful reminder of the fear clawing at her throat. Jake was gasping beside her, struggling to keep pace, but each breath came faster, more erratic. "Mom! We need to stop!" he cried, his voice cracking. "No," she snapped, urgency fueling her response. They had to get away from that thing. It couldn't be their neighbor, not like that. Shadows thickened around them, a suffocating blanket that seemed to absorb sound. But as they ran deeper into the forest, Sarah's feet started to feel heavy as if the ground itself were trying to pull her back to where they had started. "Where are we going?" Jake stammered in fear, but the answer dissolved on her lips. She had no idea. The forest twisted in on itself, the path morphing into an unrecognizable maze. The tall trees seemed to crowd inwards, their gnarled branches intertwining, forming a prison of foliage. She felt disoriented, like the woods were reshaping themselves, rearranging just to trap them. Suddenly, there were voices, sudden, sharp whispers that flitted between the trees like dark birds. Sarah froze, gripping Jake's arm, her instinct screaming at her to listen. The words rolled around her like fog, taunting and familiar, echoing the old man's warning. "Dark intentions." "Mom!" Jake's voice brought her back. She looked down to find him gazing into the dark, wide-eyed. "What if we can't find our way out?" Swallowing hard, she forced herself to focus. There was still a chance they could escape. "We have to keep moving. I promise we'll find a way back," she said, her own voice trembling. Yet a bold lie hung in the air like the mist surrounding them. Just then, a guttural growl broke through the stillness, a sound deep and menacing. It sent ice down her spine, prickly and sharp. The sinister noise felt closer than ever. Whatever had been trailing them had picked up speed, and fear mingled with adrenaline in an intoxicating rush. They ran faster, but the ground beneath her feet seemed alive, eager to trip her up. "Look!" Jake shouted, pointing ahead. In the growing darkness, a flicker of light sliced through the trees. A flimsy lantern swayed, casting shadows that danced menacingly across the ground. It looked abandoned, set down by someone fleeing deeper into the woods, a warning to them. Without thinking, she rushed toward it, dragging Jake along. They reached the lantern, and just as Sarah lifted it, the light illuminated the area around them. The glow seemed comforting, but it revealed horrors she had not anticipated. Carved into the nearby trees were crude symbols, arrows pointing deeper into the darkness, demonic faces twisted in eternal screams. Panic surged again. She dropped the lantern, its flame sputtering as it clattered to the forest floor. Jake let out a small whimper. She could feel his heart pounding against her side. "Why would they do this?" Jake murmured, eyes wide with terror, each symbol igniting the age-old fear of the unknown. "I don't know," Sarah replied, breathless. "But we need to keep moving." The whispers returned, now a cacophony, an angry chorus that rose and fell like a tide against the shore of her sanity. They were all around them, swirling in the night air with wild energy. In that fleeting moment, a realization struck her: these weren't just voices, they were the fragmented remnants of the lost hikers. Echoes woven into the very fabric of the forest. Suddenly, the flickering light bursting forth in a furious blaze interrupted her thoughts. It flared like a warning signal against the darkness, then, with a sound louder than she imagined possible, a shadow flickered past them, dark and monstrous, its form barely human. "Run!" Sarah screamed, and they lunged forward, pushed by primal instinct. But the path seemed endless, shifting like a living creature beneath their feet. The night closed in, a suffocating cloak around them, each step drawing them further from safety and deeper into the unimaginable. As the dreadful shadow followed, she couldn't shake the dreadful thought: would they become part of Wendy's dark history? Would they forever haunt the trail they had naively ventured down? Their breaths turned into frantic gasps as they fought against the grip of terror threatening to ensnare them, but somewhere ahead, the darkness seemed to swallow the light entirely. What awaited them in the abyss? They stumbled through the suffocating gloom, hearts racing, every rustling leaf sending shivers up their spines. The growling was relentless now, echoing through the dense trees, a horrible reminder that they weren't alone in this nightmare. "Mom! It's getting closer!" Jake cried, his voice tinged with an edge of panic that knifed into Sarah's gut. She scampered, pushing her legs harder, praying they could outpace the looming darkness. The underbrush scratched at their skin, the branches snatching at their clothes like desperate fingers trying to hold them back. Sarah felt a wave of hopelessness wash over her. This forest wasn't just alive, it was a predator crafting a labyrinth, tightening its grip with every painful step. A sharp intake of breath came from Jake, and he pointed. "Look!" Just ahead, a clearing opened up. In the middle stood a stone structure, ancient yet twisted, blocks piled haphazardly. It resembled a forgotten altar, disgraced and marred, covered in those same sinister symbols they had seen carved into the trees. Shadows danced along the stones, warping under the feeble light from their lantern, merging with the darkness to paint an unsettling canvas of horror. "Stay close," Sarah whispered, gripping Jake's hand tighter. They stepped into the clearing cautiously, the air thick with an oppressive silence that felt like a weight upon their chests. She could feel Jake trembling beside her, every fiber of her being urging her to turn and flee, but they had no choice. Every avenue seemed blocked. "It looks abandoned," Jake murmured, but there was no comfort, only dread. The shadows seemed to breathe, sliding back and forth as if they had intentions of their own. "Maybe someone else came this way," Sarah offered, but her voice lacked conviction. Suddenly, a sharp cracking sound punctured the stillness. An unseen force seemed to shift in the shadows, and instinct kicked in. "Run!" She screamed, propelling herself and Jake toward the right side of the altar. The growl grew fiercer, a low rumble that transformed into manic howls that echoed off the stones. Panic-fueled adrenaline surged through her. They surged forward as the growls morphed into agonized screams, voices of the lost weaving into the air like an intricate web of sorrow. "Mom! What is happening?" Jake cried out, his voice trembling with fear. "I don't know. Just keep moving." The altar was behind them now, retreating into the treacherous dark, but a new dread gripped her heart. It felt like the structure was not just a relic but a beacon, a trap calling them in, and snaring them further into Wendy's dark history, as if it discerned their fear and exploited it. Suddenly, she staggered as her foot caught on something, a rock. No, it was something else. Sarah fell, her palms scraping against the ground, pain emanating in waves as she looked back to see what had tripped her. A skeletal hand protruded from the earth, fingers twisted and sharp, glowing with an unnatural light, an arm clinging to the land, reaching out. It wasn't just an earthen grave, it felt alive, feeding off the very essence of all who had come before. "Get up! Mom, please!" Jake's voice pierced through the haze of terror, snapping her back to reality. She pushed herself up, shaking off the bone-chilling sight. They ran again, but now the air had a new weight, a suffocating urgency that crackled with energy. The howls morphed into laughter, inhuman, cruel. It felt like the forest itself was mocking their attempts to escape, to find sanctuary. "Mom! I can't breathe!" Jake gasped, his small frame struggling against the overwhelming dread that clung to them. "Almost there," she encouraged, though no exit lay in sight. With branches whipping at their faces, the shadows twisted around them, becoming part of their desperate flight. They burst out from the trees and stumbled onto a dirt road dimly lit, but no familiar signs of civilization to comfort them. The air felt colder, heavier, and in those fleeting moments before the next breath, she was filled with a horrible realization: they had run straight into a trap, a place with no way home. A chill crept up her spine as she sensed it, something small darting around the trees, eyes gleaming with hunger. Whispers gathered once more, an unseen audience drawn to their fear, feasting on it like an incantation. "Jake," she started, panic clawing at her throat, but when she looked at him, his eyes were glazed over, lost in the shadows of that accursed place. The laughter surged again, growing louder. This time, she recognized it, her own name twisted in anguish, mixed with echoes of the past's victims, spiraling into a maddening chant. They were trapped. And she realized there was nowhere to run. What would she be willing to sacrifice to survive this night? The stillness of the dirt road mocked them, the darkness thickening with every pulse of despair. Sarah felt the chill in the air seep into her bones, as if something unseen was drifting closer, eager to engulf them in its suffocating grip. She gripped Jake's hand tighter, but his presence felt smaller, slipping through her fingers like sand. "We need to find help," she whispered, her voice trembling with uncertainty. But the truth clung to her tongue, refusing to take shape. There was no help out here. The vastness of the woods whispered the ancient secrets they were not meant to hear. The shadows swirled, drawing near as she scanned the trees, desperate for a glimmer of solace. A flicker of light, the reflection of something shiny, caught her eye just off the road. "Jake, wait," she said, pulling him along, her heart pounding wildly. "Mom, we should keep moving," he urged, his voice tinted with dread. "Just a moment," she replied, determined but unsure. They stepped into the underbrush, the crunch of leaves beneath their feet blending with the ominous growls echoing in the distance, edging closer, hungry for their terror. A tangle of roots and branches guarded a small clearing. In its center lay an old, rusted bike, a relic of someone's forgotten journey. Its tires were deflated, wheels caked with mud, and beside it, a weathered backpack, the zippers stained with brown and crusted dirt. Sarah's heart raced as she approached, glancing back at Jake. "Maybe we can find something useful," she mumbled, but doubt laced her words. Jake didn't respond. He stared into the trees, eyes wide, his breath caught in his throat. "What is it?" she asked, turning sharply. "Mom, there's something over there," he whispered, pointing shakily. She followed his gaze, dread clawing at her insides. From behind the oak trees, figures emerged, haggard shapes moving slowly, eyes shadowed. They were ghostly outlines, drawn to the terror of mother and son, lingering just beyond the veil of darkness. Time seemed to freeze as Sarah squinted, her heart thudding in sync with the growls, now mingled with low, guttural whispers. Was it just her mind playing tricks, or did she hear her name carried on the wind? "Mom! We have to go." Jake yanked on her arm, panic spilling from his voice. But she couldn't tear her eyes away. In the moonlight, she glimpsed the symbols they had seen carved on the altar, branding the skin of the approaching figures. She shuddered. They were not just remnants of the forest, but remnants of those who had walked here before, intertwined with its dark heartbeat. "Run, Sarah!" Her own voice echoed back, louder, filled with stitched fear and relentless anguish. Jerking herself from the trance, she spun and bolted from the clearing, dragging Jake after her. They dashed for the road, but the ethereal figures were behind them now, the laughter becoming clear, mocking, gleeful. "We're almost there," she gasped, lunging forward, but every step felt heavier, like the ground itself was trying to pull them back into the void. "Mom!" Jake cried, slipping on the loose dirt and nearly tumbling to the ground. She caught his hand, holding him firm. Then it happened. A blinding flash of light erupted from the trees, blinding her for a moment. A swirling energy pierced the air, a shrill scream joining the cacophony. Her heart raced as shadows tore at her sides, scratching, clawing, relentless in their pursuit. "Keep moving," she shouted, forcing herself to push Jake forward. Just as they left the clearing, a figure lunged from the trees, pale and angular, face warped in an expression of rage and despair. "Why are you here?" it shrieked, voice grating like nails on a chalkboard. But Sarah didn't have time to respond. She pulled Jake into a sprint, adrenaline fueling them as more figures emerged, hunched and grotesque, their features indistinguishable but filled with unspeakable rage. Every instinct told her they were not meant to leave. The laughter crescendoed, and a voice broke through, commanding them, "Turn back." They raced down the narrow road, but the sound of shrieks grew. louder, enveloping them in a suffocating embrace. She glanced back just once, her breath hitching in her throat. A crowd of shadowy figures flooded the woods, eyes ablaze with terrible hunger. "Jake, we have to go," she cried, but he was falling behind. And then she felt the cold fingers of fear wrap around her heart. What if it was too late? Ahead, the road forked, two paths disappearing into the darkness. Hard choices loomed. Would either lead them to safety or further into hell? The forest beckoned, and she paused, her instincts screaming, making her choices feel more dire. The haunting whispers grew, and a chilling voice echoed in her mind, "You can't escape your fate." What was about to claim her and Jake? They skidded to a halt at the fork, breathless and wild-eyed. Panic clawed at Sarah's throat, squeezing tighter with each second that bled by. Lost in the malevolent embrace of the woods, her mind raced. One path shimmered with a ghostly silver light, almost inviting. The other vanished into the dark, a gaping maw of uncertainty. "Mom?" Jake's small voice trembled, pulling her back. He shifted nervously, glancing behind them where shadows twisted unnaturally. "Which way?" The air around them thickened, carrying the sharp scent of decay mixed with something sweetly deceptive. "I don't know, baby," she whispered, trying to quell the rising tide of dread that threatened to drown her rationale. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath their feet. With no time left to ponder, Sarah made a decision. "We go left. Stay close." Jake nodded, but fear etched deep lines on his young face. They plunged into the underbrush, every snap of a twig sounding like thunder in the ominous quiet. The laughter echoed behind them, guttural and twisted, rising up in monstrous delight. With each step, the darkness seemed to pulse and swell, closing in on them. Sarah had to fight the urge to look back, to see what horrors trailed within the shadows. She could feel the weight of unseen eyes tracking their every move, ready to feast on their fear. "Mom! They're coming!" Jake gasped. Heart pounding, she turned briefly to catch a glimpse, and terror seized her. Glowing eyes blinked into existence behind the trees. Countless figures, the same grotesque shapes she had seen moments before, surged after them. The rhythmic thud of their dragging feet echoed like a chant, hungry, relentless. "Run, Jake! Now!" she yelled, instinctively setting a faster pace, pushing herself forward as raw adrenaline clawed at her lungs. Branches whipped against her face, tearing at her skin, but she pressed on, pulling Jake alongside her. They stumbled deeper into the woods, losing sight of where they had entered. The earth shifted beneath them, and a hollow sound reverberated as though the ground was alive, working against them. "We need to find a place to hide. Somewhere," she cried, desperation lining her every word. Glancing around, she spotted a gargantuan tree, its roots so large they formed a natural shelter at its base. "Over there." Sarah pointed, urgency fueling their movement. They hurled themselves into the gnarl of roots just as the laughter crescendoed into shrieks. It pierced the air like arrows. Heart racing, she covered Jake's mouth with a trembling hand, their breaths echoing in terrifying synchronicity. "Quiet!" she hissed, feeling the aura of dread circle them. From the darkness, she could hear the figures closing in. They gathered around the tree, their murmurs weaving an incomprehensible tapestry of horror. Whispers tangled with laughs, words snagging at the back of Sarah's mind, taunting her. "You'll never find peace." Jake trembled in her grip, and she felt hot tears brimming in her own eyes. "Mom, I don't want to stay here," he whimpered. Sarah felt like gravity was crushing her. She leaned closer to whisper, "I know, but we can't move." "Not yet." The shadowy figures crouched low, their heads cocked like animals, waiting. Then silence fell. A ravenous stillness settled, amplifying every rustle of the leaves above them. Despair radiated from her. What kind of creatures were these? Were they the lost souls of those who had come before? Was there a way to get through this alive? Just as her heart sank deeper into despair, a hiss reverberated from the throng, breaking the silence. "Find them," and with that, the shadows began to disperse, slipping back into the trees, leaving behind only the echoes of their menacing whispers. "Mom?" Jake's voice was barely more than a breath. But Sarah wasn't reassured. Where had they gone? Why had they stopped? Suddenly, the night erupted with a new sound, a branch snapping loudly nearby, followed by a low growl that set her heart on fire. "Mom?" She felt the cold grip of dread tightening around her throat. "Shoo!" she urged, her heart hammering. The shadow figures might be gone, but something just as sinister lurked close by. A pair of slitted eyes shone from the darkness. What were they truly facing in the abyss of this forest? And would they even make it out alive? A chill scraped along Sarah's spine. The growl echoed, almost a whisper on the wind, threading through her mind like a needle of fear, stitching her doubts together. She glanced at Jake, his eyes wide and glistening. The shadows may have receded, but something was still out there, hungry and lurking. "Stay close," she murmured, her voice a feeble shield against the dark. The tree's roots were cold and damp against her skin. She could feel the heartbeat of the earth itself reverberating through her body, a reminder that they weren't alone. She pressed her back against the rough bark, trying to become one with it, to blend into the ancient trees that had seen so much darkness. The growling came again, a low, guttural sound that vibrated the air around them. Sarah's breath hitched as she dared a glance through the twisted roots. A pair of gleaming eyes stared back from the underbrush. They weren't the glowing eyes of the shadows, these were predatory, calculating. A shiver coursed through her body. "Mom!" Jake whimpered again, his small hand trembling against hers. The entity moved closer, its form becoming clearer. It was a massive creature, its fur matted, the rancid smell wafting toward her like a warning. Jagged teeth glistened in the faint light of the moon breaking through the foliage. This was a predator, no doubt, but its characteristics were alien, twisted by the darkness of these woods. "Jake," Sarah croaked, her voice as thin as a spider's thread. "We have to be very quiet." But the creature's growl shifted into something else, a huff of curiosity, followed by a sharp, almost mocking sound that sliced through the still air. It was a sound that licked at the edges of her sanity. "Find them." The whisper merged with the growl, an echo weaving a tapestry of terror around Sarah and Jake. Panic surged as Sarah felt the roots tighten, as though warning her to stay put. "What do we do?" Jake whispered, voice trembling. "We wait." She could hardly hear her own words over the pounding of her heart. "Just, stay still." The creature stalked closer, moving with a predatory grace that sent waves of dread spiraling through her. She could see its breath puffing through the night air, a visible testament to its hunger. What was this thing? Was it the Shadow's master? The dark figure emerged fully, towering above the roots with grotesquely elongated limbs. It froze, snuffling the air, and Sarah felt a frigid wave crash over her. The shadows in the forest stilled, as if holding their breath, waiting for the inevitable. Then it turned, drawn to something, and Sarah's heart surged with false hope. It stepped back into the cover of the trees, but the sense of relief was fleeting. The shadows nearby twitched, revealing more glowing eyes, all fixated on them. "Mom!" Jake's voice cracked like glass, shattering the fragile moment they hoped to hold on to. Before Sarah could react, the thing returned, circling the tree in an unsettling dance, low growls vibrating through the ground. She felt something shift inside her, an instinct to flee. Suddenly, a series of sharp snaps echoed as more things pushed their way through the underbrush. It was a chorus of snarls and growls, amplifying the chaos around them. Sarah's heart raced, a lunatic drummer in her chest screaming for escape. They wouldn't be hidden for long. Adrenaline surged through her, electrifying her senses. "We have to get out of here. Now." With housing shadows closing in, doubt clung to her like the chill seeping into her bones. The direction was lost. But she could hear faint whispers again, drawing her, seducing her. "Find us. Mom!" Jake's terrified shout startled her. "What do we?" But he cut off as the ground beneath them trembled, like a beast waking from a deep slumber. The silence shattered as shrieks erupted from all around. They were coming back. In that moment of dread, a terrifying thought struck. What if this night was never meant to end? Sarah's mind raced as she scanned for an escape. Gazes locked once again, shadows closing in. They stepped forward, breathing heavily, shadows writhing around them like serpents. Was this their new reality? Would they become part of the forest itself? "Jake, we run!" She took his hand, squeezing fiercely, and together they plunged out from their sanctuary of roots. But where to? The shadows lurked and whispered, and behind them, that echoing growl erupted with renewed vigor. And what lay ahead? They couldn't know until they stepped into the light or fell as prey to darkness. The roots clawed at their ankles as Sarah pulled Jake forward, the darkness stretching like a living thing behind them. Their breath fogged in the frigid air, each gasp a reminder of the terror nipping at their heels. The growls morphed into a cacophony, a twisted choir chanting their doom. "Faster! Don't look back!" Sarah hissed, feeling the oppressive weight of unseen eyes tracking their every move. The forest was no longer just a backdrop, it was a predator, eager to ensnare them in its tangled grasp. They stumbled over gnarled branches and jutting stones, each step more frantic than the last. Sarah risked a glance over her shoulder, a split-second decision that sent ice flooding through her veins. The creature was there, closer now, its mouth twisted in a grotesque grin, teeth glistening ominously under the murky moonlight. "Mom!" Jake cried, dragging Sarah's focus back. "Where do we go?" "Just run. Keep moving." Panic laced her words, and she felt the tension of the night strangle around her throat. Ahead, the trees thinned slightly. Light a sliver beckoning them like a whispered promise. It sparked a flicker of hope, despite trembling fingers and the gnawing dread crawling over her skin. But hope twisted into terror as the shadows behind them surged forward, cutting off their escape. More figures emerged, grotesque silhouettes merging with the night, their eyes burning like coals. "Find them. Bring them to us." The echo of that haunting command reverberated through the air, curling into Sarah's ears like a silent scream. "Mom!" Jake cried again, his small voice filled with terror. She could see it shaking him, filling him with despair, and she couldn't let that happen. "Jake, follow me. Now!" She lunged toward the fading light. He scrambled close behind, his tiny legs pumping furiously. As they broke through the tree line, the ground shifted beneath them, a steep incline leading downwards. The light grew brighter, almost blinding, and for a moment, they felt its warmth a fleeting relief. But it beckoned, inviting them into a deeper unknown. Sarah's instinct screamed to stop. "Wait, something's not right." The ground trembled again, but this time, it was not from their flight. Instead, it was an unsettling shudder that filtered through the earth, heavy and rhythmic. "What is that?" Jake cried, panic creeping back into his voice. "Just keep running," Sarah urged, even though uncertainty gnawed at her guts. Then the light shifted, morphing into something sickly sweet, its hue casting a wrongness over the world. As they descended, creatures poured out of the shadows behind them, wolf-like and twisted, seemingly drawn to that very light, hungry and relentless. They dashed toward it, Sarah leaking adrenaline in desperate bursts. But as they neared, the ground cracked. A sound like thunder echoed, splitting the night. The illusion of safety faltered, revealing a dark chasm glowing with an unnatural sheen. "No!" Sarah screamed, stumbling to a halt, yanking Jake back just in time. The sudden stop sent them both to the ground, struggling to dodge the shadows that crested the edge. What is that?" Jake whispered, his voice small, like a frightened animal. As she clutched Jake close, the chorus of growls reached a fever pitch. The creatures were spilling over, a wave of darkness that sought to consume them. They would be trapped in this nightmare unless... "Jake, we must jump." Fear clawed at her, but Sarah couldn't think of any other option. Behind them, the shadows combined in a throaty roar that echoed and reverberated against the hollow of her chest. "Trust me," she shouted, grip tightening around his wrist. With a deep breath, she ran toward the edge. The creatures shrieked in unison, hungry sounds that sent a jolt of adrenaline through her veins. Sarah launched them into the light, a desperate leap into the unknown. Time slowed. The sensation of falling swallowed them whole, and for one terrifying moment, she wondered if they would ever reach solid ground again. And what awaited them at the bottom? The shadows loomed above, ready to reclaim what they thought was theirs. As they fell, Sarah's heart pounded to a rhythm of fear, her mind racing what would become of them in the depths of whatever lay ahead. The ground hit them hard, an unforgiving plunge into darkness. Sarah gasped as her body absorbed the shock, adrenaline roaring through her veins. She quickly rolled to the side, pulling Jake with her. They landed in a damp, cold pit, the air thick with a musty smell that made her stomach churn. "Mom?" Jake whimpered, and his small voice quivered in the dark. "I'm here," Sarah whispered, forcing a calmness she didn't feel. She struggled to catch her breath, her heart still drumming a frantic tempo. They were in some kind of underground chamber, the faintest glow emanating from strange, luminous fungi growing on the walls. It illuminated jagged stone, casting looming shadows that flickered like restless spirits. Sarah peered around, trying to get her bearings. The sounds of the creatures receded above them, but she knew the momentary silence was deceptive. They couldn't be far behind. "Stay close to me," she instructed Jake, feeling claustrophobia tightening around her chest as she glanced at the narrow and winding passageways that branched from the chamber. Panic threatened to claw its way back up her throat, but they had no choice. She had to move, had to survive. "Which way should we go?" Jake asked, small and frightened. His eyes searched the darkness, begging for direction. "Let us see if we can find a way out," she said, masking her uncertainty. They could go either direction, but something in her gut pulled her towards the right tunnel, where the glow seemed brighter. As they crept forward, the air grew heavy, each step sounding like a drumbeat echoing in a cavernous void. The walls felt wet beneath her fingertips, and she tried not to imagine what might dwell in this dank place. A distant sound reached them, a low, guttural growl that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. "Did you hear that?" Jake asked, his voice shaking. "Sure," Sarah hissed, straining to listen. The growl morphed into something worse, a slithering hiss that chilled her blood. They weren't alone. "Mom. I want to go home," Jake said, tears welling in his eyes. She felt a pang of despair at the heartbreaking innocence in his words. "I know, honey. I promise I'll get you out of here," she said, forcing her voice steady. They pressed on, the glow from the fungi casting erratic shadows that danced around them. Suddenly, a screech echoed off the cavern walls, a sound so primal that it seemed to freeze the very air. Sarah's heart raced as they bolted down the tunnel, urgency feeding their fear. The glow intensified, revealing an opening ahead. Yet, as they neared, they were met by a horrifying sight. A vast underground lake spread before them, its surface eerily still, yet pulsating with an unnatural light. The water shimmered with hues of green and yellow, and flickering shapes moved just beneath the surface. "Mom, what is that?" Jake gasped, his small hand clutching her arm. "I don't know," she breathed, unable to tear her eyes away from the lake. The instincts that once pushed her to flee now pressed her to stay. It was as if the water was calling to them, whispering promises of safety and refuge. "Mom." Jake's urgency broke her trance. He pointed at the other side of the lake, where the eerily calming glow seemed to form a bridge across the water's surface. "They're coming." he screamed, tugging her back to reality. The shadows were closer now, their howls echoing through the chamber. "We have to cross it," Sarah shouted over the noise, fear overriding her caution. "Are you crazy?" Jake exclaimed, wide-eyed. "I don't see any other way," she retorted, determination surging within her. He looked terrified, but she could see the glimmer of desperate hope in his eyes. And then, without thinking, she stepped to the edge, feeling the cool mist of the lake swirl around her, enveloping her in its eerie embrace. Just as she was about to take a step forward, a hand shot up from the water, glistening under the strange luminescence. It gripped the edge and pulled, revealing a face, pale and distorted, eyes black as pitch. "Come to us," it whispered, and the sinister invitation sent a jolt of terror through her core. "Jake, back away!" Sarah shrieked, stumbling backward as the creature emerged fully, water dripping from its skeletal fingers, eyes locked on her with insatiable hunger. "Mom, we need to run!" Jake cried out, terror morphing his small frame into an urgent blur. But just then, the shadows behind them coalesced into one grotesque figure, cackling, blocking their escape. They were trapped, but not just by darkness. The realization hit her this was a lure, a trap. "Jake, we have to find another way," she yelled, panic surging again, the tunnel already closing in behind them. The two creatures advanced, the pale figure beckoning them closer, its rasp growing louder. What lay ahead in this cursed chamber? Was there a way out, or were they forever lost in the dark abyss? "Please help us," she whispered, both a plea and a question, knowing the answer might be more horrifying than the shadows looming around them. The creature extended its long, withered fingers, the slimy skin glimmering under the lake's unsettling light. Its mouth curled into a grotesque grin, revealing rows of serrated teeth that looked more at home in a predator than a human. Sarah's instincts screamed at her to run, but she felt paralyzed, trapped in that moment of horrifying revelation. "Jake, now!" she shouted, forcing her legs to act. She grabbed Jake's hand, yanking him away from the edge as the creature lunged forward, splattering water across the stones. Each drop sent a shiver down her spine, and panic flared through her veins. The other figure, a mass of writhing shadows, moved closer, its laughter echoing through the chamber like a sickly lullaby. It seemed to melt into the darkness, a shapeshifter embodying dread itself. "Mom! Where do we go?" Jake yelled, his grip tightening around her fingers. She looked both ways. The dark tunnel behind them was blocked now, and the shimmering lake loomed with an almost magnetic allure. "Follow me!" she screamed, darting towards the faint glow of the left tunnel. Each step felt like a gamble against fate. Would the shadows follow? The air felt charged with danger, thick and suffocating. As they sprinted through the tunnel, its walls closed in around them, the faint glow of the fungi flickering like dying stars. The screeches of the creatures faded slightly behind them, a haunting reminder of the chase that would not end. But Sarah's mind raced. She had to keep them moving, keep them alive. "Mom, they're coming!" Jake cried. His small voice fought against the oppressive darkness, every echo amplifying their fears. "No, they can't catch us. We just need to move faster." She pushed onward, desperation lending strength to her legs. But the tunnel seemed to stretch infinitely ahead, twisting and turning, obscuring any glimmers of hope. Suddenly, the ground shook beneath them, and a deep rumble reverberated through the walls. A crack spiderwebbed across the floor. Sarah's heart raced. Was the structure collapsing? "Stay close!" she shouted, jerking Jake to her side. She felt the heat of a breath behind them, hot and rancid, like decay itself. They had to run. A scream tore through the air, sharp and visceral. It was Jake. She spun around and saw him stumble, the shadowy figure stretching out its limb towards him. The moment was surreal, a slow-motion nightmare. "Mom, help me!" Jake's face was a mask of terror. In one swift motion, Sarah lunged forward, pulling him up just as the shadows threatened to envelop him. "Keep moving," she snarled, adrenaline coursing through her. But Jake fell back again, weak with fear. In that instant of hesitation, the lake's light flickered dimly in her mind, a throbbing pulse that promised safety. It teased her thoughts, whispering that they could find solace there, away from the monsters. "No!" she roared, shaking her head violently. "We're not going back. We must push through." They ran on, racing through the tunnel, hearts pounding, the screams of what was left behind echoing in their ears. And just as Sarah thought they would find an exit, a wall of darkness crashed down, blocking their path. There was no escape, they were encircled. What now? Jake buried his head against her shoulder, his breath warm against her neck, but she knew this wasn't reassurance, it was desperation. The shadows began merging into a massive silhouette, shifting and swirling, taking form from their deepest fears. Sarah realized with dawning horror that the nightmare was not just behind them, it was within the very fabric of the tunnel itself. "Mom!" Jake whimpered again, his voice trembling. Just then, a loud crash echoed in the distance, shaking the ground below them. It sent vibrations through her feet, a reminder that they weren't alone in this suffocating darkness. "Run!" Sarah yelled, and even she didn't believe the words. With a surge of energy she didn't know she had, she led Jake towards the growing sound, hoping it was a chance, a way to escape the clutches of whatever waited within. Would they find an end to this nightmare, or was it merely the beginning of something worse? The darkness murmured sweetly, promising and threatening all at once. As they charged toward the noise, another figure emerged from the shadows, a face frozen in agony. Did it speak? Did it plead for help? What more horrors awaited them in the depths? Would they ever see the light of day again? The ground trembled violently as Sarah and Jake raced toward the cacophony that echoed through the tunnel. Every footfall felt like a countdown, and the screams of the lost souls the shadows seemed to fuse with the very stone around them. "Mom!" Jake yelled, panic etching deeper lines on his young face. "Where are we going?" "I don't know," Sarah shouted back, fighting the suffocating despair threatening to pull her under. "Just keep running." They plunged headlong into the darkness, jostling through the air thick with dread. The echoes of howling shadows clawed at their heels, a pack hungry for the scent of fear. Sarah's heart raced, not just from the strain of the flight but from the twisted realization, who were the real monsters here? The sound of shattering stone grew louder, and with each rush of sound, it felt like a heartbeat bigger, alive, and furious. "Go that way!" Sarah shouted, spotting a narrow passage that branched off to the left. They veered into the sliver of light breaking through the gloom, sharp rocks scraping against their legs. The air felt charged. Something was building, and they had to escape before whatever lurked behind converged on them. Suddenly, they broke free from the tunnel and emerged into a cavern wide and ominously lit, faint glimmers reflecting off stone walls adorned with those horrific carvings, faces twisted in agony, symbols of a past that begged to be buried. Streaks of murky water pooled around ancient stones like memories refusing to fade. But then, the shadows surged forward, a wall of dark limbs clawing against the air. "Mom!" Jake pulled at her sleeve, his small voice trembling. She felt his fear rising, a palpable essence that cracked the last seams of her resolve. "Stay behind me," Sarah ordered, pushing forward, but desperation gripped her throat. They were outnumbered. Out of the growing darkness, a familiar yet grotesque shape slithered forth, the figure of their neighbor, twisted by whatever malevolence defined these woods. Its eyes held a void, an emptiness that echoed the words of the old man, "The trail's guardian doesn't take kindly to those with dark intentions." "Help us!" Jake shouted, as the creature drew closer, hunting them with a hunger that rendered the air thick and suffocating. "We need to make it to the other side," Sarah shouted, pulling Jake toward a jagged pathway leading away from the abyss of shadows. But the ground erupted into a snarl of motion as another figure deformed and snarling came rushing towards them from the other side. Run! The command flooded out of her mouth like a second language, instinct taking over. Sarah grabbed Jake's hand, adrenaline igniting her veins as they darted forward. They raced past the grotesque figures, the darkness swirling around them like a living organism, and for a moment, the world narrowed, just the two of them forging ahead into the unknown. Finally, the path opened up ahead, a glimmer of hope thrusting against the looming shadows, but salvation required a leap of faith. "Jake, I need you to trust me," Sarah called, urgency spilling from her chest. She glanced back, the figures were gaining ground. On 3, 1, 2, 3. With a heave of wills, they leaped forward, landing on a patch of solid ground, breathless and trembling. But their moment of safety was fleeting as a colossal shadow loomed over them, enveloping the escape route behind them. "No!" Jake cried as the figures gathered once again, their hollow laughter ringing cruelly through the air. The darkness pulsated with an insatiable hunger, the road to freedom crumbling beneath their feet. But from this seemingly endless night came a sound different than the others, a distant roar, deep and thunderous, sending a tremor through the stone. The shadows recoiled, pressing back as if fearing something worse. "What is happening?" Jake gasped, confusion threading through his panic. "I don't know," Sarah yelled, feeling the oppressive hold of the darkness begin to slacken. The figures hissed, retreating into the shadows, their eyes reflecting uncertainty. Then, from the depths of the cavern, a bright light emerged, diffusing through every crevice, illuminating the stonework, dispelling the shadows weaving around them like a storm. "Over here!" Sarah shouted towards the light, her instincts flaring again. The figures screamed, a cacophony of fury, retreating as they neared the illumination. Drawing her son close, they charged toward the bright beacon, feeling the weight of the shadows diminish. Stepping into the light, an overwhelming sense of relief washed over them. They had crossed the threshold. As they moved further into the glow, the howls began to wane, replaced by echoes of fading whispers like a heartbeat calming. "What just happened?" Jake asked, awe mingling with lingering fear. "I don't know, but we made it," Sarah exhaled, tears prickling at her eyes. The light enveloped them fully, and as it did, they lifted their faces to the warmth. Slowly, the darkness receded, the chilling memory of shadows slipping into the forgotten corners of their minds. Breathless and exhausted, they stepped out into the familiar expanse of whispering pines trail, the forest teasing escape as the sun began to rise. The golden hues spilled over the treetops, and in that moment, Sarah felt the weight of the night begin to unshackle from their souls. As they took in the serene landscape around them, Jake turned to her, wide-eyed. Did we really make it?" "Yes," Sarah whispered, a smile breaking through her exhaustion. "We did." The laughter of the woods was gone. In its place, a beautiful silence emerged, cradling their weary hearts in soft repose. But deep down, they knew, never again would they take the trails for granted. The beautiful yet haunted trails weaving through whispering pines held stories of shadows and light that forever etched the fabric of their lives. As they began their journey back, Sarah felt a gentle warmth wrap around them, a promise that even darkness had its end. And just like that, they left the shadows behind, emerging toward the dawn, a new beginning born from terrifying encounters that would haunt them no longer. Now it's your turn to stay connected. You need to subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss any exclusive stories like this. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and keep the adventures coming. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending. And finally, don't wait even one more second. Instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to join us on next week's journey. Your support makes all the difference in keeping this channel thriving.